Here's the full script in English, using the structure we agreed on, written for high retention and a natural conversational flow. When the sirens stopped and the smoke started to clear over Tel Aviv, the internet had already made up its mind. In one corner of your feed, people were saying the city was basically wiped off the map, blocks flattened, total collapse. This is it. In another corner, the posts claimed almost nothing got through, that Israel's defenses were perfect, and life was carrying on like a normal Tuesday. Two completely different worlds, both going viral, both impossible to verify if you're just scrolling on your phone. And yet, both of those stories miss something important: what actually happened on the ground. Because in this kind of conflict, missiles are only one weapon. The other weapon is information. The videos, the tweets, the hot takes, and the breaking updates that hit your screen before anyone has checked if they're even real. So in this video, we're not chasing the loudest clip or the scariest caption. We're going to break down what really happened when Iranian missiles hit Tel Aviv, how Iran's strike strategy actually works, what Israel's defense systems did and didn't stop, and how to separate hard evidence from pure engagement bait. By the end, you'll see why the truth is less dramatic than the worst headlines, more serious than the calmest reassurances, and way more complicated than what goes viral in 15 seconds. The moment the first reports of Iranian missiles heading toward Israel appeared, social media did what it always does in a crisis. It turned chaos into content. Clips from Tel Aviv started circulating without context: shaky phone videos, explosions in the distance, people yelling, car alarms screaming in the background. Some of those videos were real. Some were old clips recycled from previous conflicts, and some were reposted with captions that had nothing to do with what was actually happening. But here's the problem. In that first wave, most people don't care about verification. They care about emotion. The posts that rage, shock, or terrify you are the posts that spread. So the most extreme narratives rise to the top. On one side, you get Tel Aviv has fallen. On the other, you get everything was intercepted, nothing to see here. Neither frame is accurate. And the longer you stay inside only one of those bubbles, the harder it is to see the actual pattern underneath. That's why, instead of starting with the loudest claims, we have to start with the weapon that most of these posts were talking about, even if they never mentioned it by name, the Shahab 3. But once you understand what that missile was designed to do, the pictures from Tel Aviv stop looking like total mystery and start looking like exactly what you'd expect from a very specific kind of strike. The Shahab 3 isn't just some random missile Iran fired off to make a point. It's one of the core systems in Iran's ballistic missile program, and it was developed with a clear purpose: to hit targets at roughly Israel's distance from Iranian territory. That means everything about it, its range, its payload, its trajectory, was tailored for exactly this kind of confrontation. Depending on the variant, the Shahab 3 can carry a warhead of roughly 3/4 of a ton up to around a full ton. That's not a small explosion. Over the years, Iran has upgraded its guidance systems, improving how close the missile tends to land to its intended target area. But even with those upgrades, this is not a sniper precision weapon like many Western cruise missiles or air-launched smart bombs. The Shahab 3 is a strategic bombardment weapon. It's designed to hit a general area, not the exact window of a specific room. And that one detail explains a lot of what we see and don't see in Tel Aviv. When a missile like this hits, you don't get an entire district turned into dust. You get a concentrated zone of severe damage around the impact point, then a ring of moderate damage, blown out windows, cracked walls, debris, and then, surprisingly close by, buildings that are still standing and in some cases look almost untouched from the outside. That's why you might see one video where a single building is totally devastated, and then another video from just a few streets away where cafes are still open and people are walking around. Those aren't contradictions. They're exactly what a strategic bombardment pattern looks like. But Iran didn't rely on Shahab 3 alone. It didn't just launch one missile type and hope for the best. What really mattered was how it combined that missile with other systems to push Israel's defenses to their limits. If you only think of this as Iran fired some missiles and Israel tried to shoot them down, you miss the entire strategy behind the attack. Iran didn't send one kind of weapon in a neat, simple wave. It used a layered mix of systems, each chosen to stress a different part of Israel's defense network. Alongside Shahab 3 variants, Iran has deployed solid-fuel ballistic missiles like Sejil, which can be launched more quickly and stored more easily, giving planners more flexibility in timing and intensity. Shorter-range systems such as Fateh and Zulfagar have been used in larger numbers, targeting a wider set of sites and adding volume to the overall barrage. On top of that, Iran has leaned heavily on drones, including loitering munitions designed to fly relatively low and slow compared to ballistic missiles. That drone component is critical to understand. A ballistic missile in its final phase is a fast, high-arc target. It comes in at incredible speed from above. A drone, by contrast, can cruise at low altitude, move more unpredictably, and clutter the radar picture in a way that forces defensive systems to constantly distinguish between threats that must be intercepted and objects that can be ignored. By launching drones and missiles in overlapping windows, Iran isn't just trying to hit more targets. It's trying to make every decision inside Israel's air defense network harder, faster, and more complex. The goal is to overwhelm the system not just with numbers, but with variety. So when people online say, how did anything get through if Israel has this advanced defense system? They're imagining a clean one-on-one duel. One missile, one interceptor. The reality is far messier. Multiple missile types, multiple trajectories, drones in the mix, and time pressure on every choice. And that brings us to one of the most misunderstood parts of this whole story: the Iron Dome and the broader Israeli layered defense. Because what most people think it does, and what it actually does, are not the same thing. The way Iron Dome is talked about online, you might think it's some kind of video game shield that simply deletes every incoming rocket or missile headed toward Israel. In one version of the myth, it's basically perfect. In the other version, when people want to argue that Israel's collapsing, they insist it has completely failed. Neither extreme is true. Iron Dome is designed around a very specific logic. When its radar detects an incoming projectile, the system's software calculates where that projectile is likely to land. If the predicted impact point is in an open field, the sea, or an unpopulated area, the system often does not fire an interceptor. That's not a malfunction. It's intentional. Interceptors are expensive. Short-range rockets are cheap. A system that tried to shoot down every single incoming projectile, no matter where it was going, would burn through its inventory quickly and waste missiles on threats that were never going to hit civilians or critical infrastructure. So Iron Dome focuses on what matters most: projectiles predicted to hit populated areas or important sites. Those are the ones it tries to intercept. Some of those interceptions succeed, some don't, because no system is perfect. And some projectiles are simply left alone because they're headed for areas where the impact, while still real, is judged to be less dangerous. Iron Dome is also only one layer. Above it, Israel uses systems like David's Sling, designed for medium to long-range threats, and Arrow, meant to intercept long-range ballistic missiles higher and earlier in their flight path. Together, these create overlapping coverage zones. But overlapping doesn't mean impenetrable. It doesn't mean every missile that slips past one layer is guaranteed to be stopped by the next. It means each incoming threat has multiple chances to be intercepted, and multiple chances to get through. The Shahab 3 and similar missiles were developed with exactly this kind of layered defense in mind. They're part of an ongoing arms race between offense and defense, where each side keeps adapting to the other's latest move. So when we look at Tel Aviv and see real damage in some areas and no destruction in others, that's not proof that the system worked flawlessly or totally failed. It's evidence of a defensive network that performed imperfectly but actively, stopping some threats, missing others, and making trade-offs in real time. The question then becomes, what does that look like for people actually living in the city? Because the ground reality is where the viral storylines and the truth finally collide. When you zoom out from individual clips and look at the broader picture of Tel Aviv after these strikes, you see something that doesn't fit neatly into either viral narrative. There are buildings that have suffered catastrophic damage at or very near impact points, partial collapses, gutted interiors, facades ripped open. In the immediate surrounding blocks, you see broken glass, blown-out windows, bent metal, debris scattered across streets. And then, just beyond that, you see neighborhoods where the physical damage is minimal or not visible at all. Main roads are still mostly usable. Public transport hasn't vanished. It's disrupted, rerouted, delayed, but not erased. Hospitals are functioning, taking in casualties from the strikes while still treating ordinary patients. Power is still flowing across most of the city, even though localized outages have hit areas close to impact zones. So no, Tel Aviv is not a flattened wasteland, but it's also not living in a calm, normal routine. The disruption is real, and you feel it most not in the skyline, but in people's daily rhythm. Every time a warning siren sounds, anyone in range has seconds to make a choice. Run to a shelter, take cover, stop whatever they're doing, and move. Do that once, and it's terrifying. Do it multiple times a day across days and nights, and it becomes a constant psychological pressure. Schools adjust their schedules or temporarily close. Businesses lose productivity as workers move to safe rooms and struggle to focus between alerts. Parents have to decide whether to send their kids to class or keep them home. People start planning their routes in the city based on where they know they can reach a shelter fast. This is what it means for a city to exist in the space between destroyed and totally fine. The infrastructure mostly stands, the routines do not. The psychological weight is heavy, even where the buildings look untouched. And even that tension, not destroyed, not normal, follows a logic when you compare Tel Aviv to another city that carries enormous symbolic weight, Jerusalem. If you compare the strike patterns between Tel Aviv and Jerusalem, a clear targeting logic emerges. Tel Aviv is Israel's primary economic engine, a major population center, and a hub for commercial, governmental, and military activity. Hurting Tel Aviv doesn't just damage buildings. It sends a message about vulnerability at the heart of the country's modern life. Jerusalem, on the other hand, occupies a very different space in this conflict. It's not just another city. It's a religious and symbolic epicenter for multiple faiths worldwide. Any large-scale destruction there would carry explosive political and religious consequences far beyond the battlefield. That doesn't mean Jerusalem has been entirely untouched. Warning sirens have sounded, impacts have occurred, but the frequency and intensity of strikes on Jerusalem have been significantly lower than on Tel Aviv. That difference reflects a calculation. Hit the economic core hard, but treat the symbolic core with more caution. In other words, this is not random. It's a deliberate targeting hierarchy, mixing military value, economic disruption, and psychological impact. Tel Aviv is the place to show that you can punch the country's everyday life. Jerusalem is the place everyone is a little more afraid to push too far. But even as missiles hit physical targets, another battle is happening in parallel. Not in the skies over Israel, but on the screens of millions of people watching from afar. For most people around the world, their entire understanding of what's happening in Tel Aviv doesn't come from being there. It comes from watching other people's footage. That creates a huge opening for manipulation, not always by faking what you see, but by carefully choosing what you don't see. Take a video filmed right next to an impact site, a building in ruins, cars crushed, glass everywhere. That clip is real. The destruction is real. But once it's posted with a caption like "Tel Aviv is gone," it stops being just a piece of evidence and becomes a story about the whole city, a story that's wrong. Now flip it. Imagine a clip from another neighborhood where the streets look calm, shops are open, people are walking their dogs. Post that with a caption like "See? Nothing's happening, it's all propaganda," and you've created the opposite lie. Both clips show something true. Both captions tell you something false. The trick is in what's left out. That's how misinformation often operates in modern conflicts. Not by fabricating every frame, but by narrowing your view until one tiny piece feels like the whole picture. And the platforms themselves reward this kind of extreme framing. The posts that spark the strongest emotional reaction are the ones that get pushed hardest by the algorithm. So how do you protect yourself from being dragged into one of these distorted narratives? You start by asking a simple question every time you see a dramatic clip. What does this actually show? And what is the person posting it asking me to believe about everything else? If the answer is, it shows one street, but it's asking me to assume the whole city looks like this, that's your red flag. You're not just being informed, you're being pulled toward a side. While all of this is happening online, there's another actor trying to shape the story, not with viral clips, but with statements, resolutions, and emergency meetings, the international community. Whenever a conflict like this escalates, the same machinery spins up at the global level. United Nations bodies call urgent meetings. Security Council members issue statements about protecting civilians and respecting international humanitarian law. Humanitarian organizations push for corridors, ceasefire windows, and protection of infrastructure. On paper, it looks like action. Mechanisms get activated, resolutions drafted, press conferences held. But the hard truth is that none of that automatically changes what happens on the ground in Tel Aviv. These frameworks can create pressure. They can set expectations, shape diplomatic costs, and make certain actions riskier for the parties involved. But they can't force missiles to stop midair or guarantee that the next strike won't hit an apartment building instead of an empty lot. So you end up with 3 layers of reality running at the same time. The physical reality of missiles, damage, and disrupted lives in Tel Aviv. The political reality of international actors trying to manage the fallout and avoid a wider war. And the information reality of millions of people forming opinions based mostly on what they see through a screen. That last layer, the information one, is where all of this connects back to you. Because the way you understand what's happening doesn't just affect your emotions. It shapes how you think about responsibility, escalation, and what solutions look like. Which brings us to the real question this whole situation forces us to ask. So where does that leave Tel Aviv? It's not the pile of rubble some posts are claiming. It's not the untouched, everything is fine city that others are trying to project. It's something far more uncomfortable. A city that's still standing, still functioning, but living under repeated alarms, real impacts, and constant uncertainty. The missiles are real. The damage is real. The fear, the sleepless nights, the kids running to shelters, the businesses pausing midday, all of that is real. So is the fact that life hasn't stopped, that people still go to work, drive on main roads, and try to carry on in the shadow of something they can't fully predict or control. That middle ground doesn't go viral as easily as total destruction or nothing happened, but it's where the truth usually lives. And understanding that matters, not because it magically fixes anything on the ground, but because the decisions governments, international bodies, and entire populations make about this conflict are shaped by the stories they believe. If those stories are built on exaggeration, denial, or weaponized clips taken out of context, the choices that follow will be just as distorted. If they're built on a clear-eyed view of what's actually happening, the missiles that got through, the defenses that worked and failed, the cities that are hurt but not erased, then at least the debate has a chance to be honest. So the next time you see a viral post about Tel Aviv or any city under fire, ask yourself, is this showing me reality, or is it just showing me a reaction? Because in a world where information itself has become a battlefield, choosing which version of events you believe is no longer a passive act, it's part of the conflict. What kind of balance between raw analysis and emotional storytelling do you want your own channel's videos to lean toward in future scripts?